estimates 2019. To that, we now revert.
You said head.
Let's say they had
18?
No, in.
I hear 18? 80?
No, that's it. Standing Finance Committee resume, right? So I get this.
Go ahead. Standing Finance Committee resumed. Head 80.
I can call. By one.
They come in.
Head 80, Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance. Share about it. So say. Let's call it head anymore, no? Head 80, Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, in the amount of $88,332,219.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. First, let me introduce to my left my Permanent Secretary, Mr. Mark Cummins, and to the Minister, member for St. Lucy's right, is Chief Technical Officer, Ms. Cheryl Bennett Innes. In addition, we have our DPS here with us, Mr. Anthony Wiltshire, our Chief Technical Officer Operations, Mr. Philip Tudor, our Director of Drainage, Mr. Jason Bowen, our Senior Mechanical Engineer, Ms. Diane Spencer, our Principal Crown Counsel, Ms. Summer Chandler, our Chief Electrical Officer, Mr. Tyrone White, and our Director, Chief Licensing Officer, Mr. Virgil Knight. The Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance has responsibilities for several departments, together with two boards, the Transport Board and the Transport Authority. The departments include, but are not limited to, the Mechanical Workshop, the Drainage Division, the Legal Unit, Barbados Licensing Authority, Design Services, Government Electrical Engineering Department, Crown Property Maintenance, Building Section, the Project Section, Road Improvements, Road Maintenance, part of Operations, as well as Traffic Management and Building Standards. So we have one of the larger ministries that has an impact on all Barbadians and visitors to our shores in many forms and fashions. Indeed, what the general public would not appreciate is that in addition to all of that, 30% of all town planning applications are referred to this ministry for comments and approval. As it relates to the impact on the road network or drainage of particular developments. In addition, we have responsibility for 13 depots that service the entire island, and the work of the depots include weeding, debushing, pothole patching, slipper and curbs, erecting bus stops, traffic marking, painting pedestrian crossings, repairing damaged box drains, clearing footpaths, erecting traffic mirrors in dangerous bends and junctions, constructing retaining walls and shuttering manholes, formwork, guardrails, concrete slabs, wheelchair ramps, bridge post repairing, repairing culverts and manholes, and this work is continued on a daily basis by most of the depots. The workshop not only maintains our equipment, but they're also responsible for the assessment of and boarding of all of the government's vehicles. And let me pause here and say that we need mechanics badly in the workshop, and I'm making another plea for the Personnel Administration Division to give us the 17 mechanics that we badly need in the workshop. We currently have 7, and they are having a great difficulty maintaining and keeping all of our equipment on the roads, and we badly need more mechanics. Further, this ministry has undergone a restructuring program which saw about 298 of its workers being retrenched. And in order to minimize the effect of this retrenchment on the workload of the ministry, we have gone about reorganizing, deconstructing, and reconstructing all of our processes. And we are instituting and implementing a technology-based solution to be able to meet all of our requirements and commitments going forward for the ministry. It is also important to note that this ministry also contributes to the significant revenue for the country. Highway revenue from motor vehicles this year is expected to be $17 million, and $75 million from the fuel tax, as well as from public service vehicles for another $10 million. We also have revenue from driver's licenses, and these estimates for $5 million, and vehicle inspections for $2 million. License issuing permits, $500,000, special permits, another $2 million. Other activities like badges, motor driving tests, as well as visitor permits, surveying of vehicles, and all the like, brings in another $2 million. So this ministry is responsible for generating revenue for the government in a total of $114 million as projected in these estimates. Our capital works program this year for 2019-2020 is an ambitious one. As part of our program, we have 13 roads to do under CAF Phase 2. We have 10 global roads to do under the IDB program, and we also have some tenantry roads to complete. And if you crave your indulgence, I would go through a few of the CAF roads. First, under CAF Phase 1, we would have done, or in the process of doing, Flagstaff Road, Harry Smith Road. We're in the process of doing Kings Village Road, Lowthers Road, Melverton Road, Padmore Village, Little Bay Road, and Long Bay Road. That is CAF Phase 1. CAF Phase 2, we're about to go to tender shortly for Well Gap, Welch's Village, St. Catharines Bayfield, Babylon, Boarded Hall, Tenantry Roads 1 and 2, Gibbons Christchurch, Greenfield Road Network, Shepton Lane, Mayport Terrace, Stanley Terrace, and Valley View, all in Pinelands, Hampton, Tent Bay, Cane Garden to Bridgefield, Mount Brevotor, and I believe also Long Gap has been included in that as well. With respect to the IDB road program, you'll be aware that we have done 5 of the sample roads, and we are about to now start another 10. Those are also going out to tender shortly, and those 10 will be the global roads, and they will include the Bell Road from Lears Roundabout to ABC Highway, Highway 6 Searles, which is the Henry Ford Roundabout to Searles Roundabout, Lears Road, Canewood to Lower Estate Roundabout, Carmichael Road, which will be Boarded Hall Roundabout to Turnpike Junction, Long Bay Bel-Air Road, which is Highway 5 to Crane Roundabout, Highway 3 Hoffelsville, Clyde Walcott Roundabout to Lears Roundabout, Ermey-Bourne, Highway Phase 1, which will be Cattle Wash to Barclays Park, Ermey-Bourne Highway Phase 2 will be Barclays Park to Belle Plaine, Ermey-Bourne Highway Phase 3 eastbound will be Norman Nels to Clyde Walcott Roundabout. This is the eastbound lanes, and Highway 6 Searles to 6 Roads. So as you see, Madam Chair, we have a very, very aggressive road program that we're hoping to embark on over the next financial year. Unfortunately, the last administration left very little equipment for the ministry to carry out its mandate. So what we have been able to do is to first go to tender for $10 million worth of equipment. And we also had another $5 million in the ministry, and we started to procure equipment from that $5 million. And I could go through the list of equipment if you want, or as if we get any other questions, we're happy to go through the list of equipment, but we're certainly looking to procure that equipment, because obviously we cannot fulfill our mandate without having three things: the equipment, the material, and the labor. And once we can get those three things in place, then we'll be able to fulfill our mandate to maintain the road infrastructure of this country. We've also put in our estimates the opportunity to better equip the licensing authority. So we've put in for 3 new hoists. The hoists that we have at licensing authority currently, I've asked for estimates of their age. Some people say they're 40 years old, 50 years old. So they've been there a long time, and we've been continuing to repair and replace parts and replace various areas of the gaskets and so on to keep the hoist working. But we're looking forward to getting 3 new hoists so that we can first lift the vehicles that we need to be able to lift. Right now, the hoist can't lift the heavier vehicles. We have to send those to another entity. So we're looking forward to, once we get those estimates passed, to be able to get those hoists in position. The drainage unit, you know, the last year we had a passing of Storm Kirk, and we saw significant flooding both in the Bridgetown area as well as in the Bayland area. After assessment, we've made a decision to buy some new pumps as well as to repair the old pumps that we do have. And in these estimates, we have in position for new pumps for Princess Alice, as well as pumps for the Bayland area. And in addition, we're buying additional pumps as a rapid response team, so that if we do get flooding in any area, we'll be able to use those pumps effectively and efficiently.
Honourable Member, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. With the 2 minutes, I just want to touch on the 2 boards. The first one, Transport Authority. And I must commend the people and the members of the Transport Authority, the board there, and the members who've been working hard first to operationalize the Constitution River Terminal. And I thank them for that, as well as trying to get a grip on the permits and applications for permits and disciplinary measures that they've taken with respect to the Transport Authority. With respect to the Transport Board, this is our biggest problem in the ministry. We have been left with buses that are many, many years old. The Transport Board, the previous administration, was not paying NAS or PAYE for its employees for years. In fact, it was up to, I think, $14 million or something in that vicinity that the arrears were. So the Transport Authority is a big problem for us, and we're working constantly to try to grapple with the problems that we're being experienced at the Transport Board. What we also found was that the Transport Board and UCAL in particular, which was a company set up to be able to do all the repairs and maintenance for the Transport Board, they were starved of work, to the point that, in the words of the chairman of UCAL in a meeting, he made it clear to me, and I asked him if I could use his words, and he said yes. He said the UCAL was not prepared to pass their hand, and that is why they were starved of those resources and the work to be done. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work we have to look at the fares that are being charged. We have not decided yet, but we have to make a decision what the bus fare will go to. Obviously, you would appreciate that bus fare has not gone up in Barbados for 20 years, but everything else has gone up. The price of supplies has gone up, the price of diesel has gone up, the price of insurance has gone up, the price of labor has gone up. We haven't made a decision if it will go up by $1.50 or if it will go up by $2. We don't know, but certainly all of that has to be assessed to make a decision as to where bus fares will go. But what we do know is that we must bring order to the roads. And there's no way that we will be looking at increasing a bus fare and not having a better, higher quality service where people are safe and where you can be confident that your child or your grandchild or your mother or your sister or your brother will be able to travel in a good, safe environment on the buses and on the public service vehicles of this country. And I thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I now look forward to the questions from my colleagues.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition? No? You're speaking? No, he gives way to who? Honorable member for St. Michael East.
Minister, I appreciate what I consider to be a verbal synopsis of the entirety of what the ministry do and the intended direction that you will go in the future. I know you made mention of UCAL. and no need for me to repeat the perspective that you advance. What I'm concerned about now is, can you tell us if the ministry and the transport board is allowing UCAL to have their fair share within the market, especially as the shop which is responsible for mechanics and so on. We have had, most unfortunately for the last 10 years, we have had negative reports about the way in which this body was treated. And that was supposed to be a flagship, a model that we looked at as an alternative in the governance of the state itself.
Thank you very much, Minister. You know, I've had 2 meetings with the UCAL delegations now. And I guess first I have to declare that my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law worked at UCAL. So I feel that UCAL is like family to me. And I often tell them that they're like family to me, and I treat them like family. And because of that, not only is the Transport Board directing much more work to UCAL, in fact, as much as they can carry, but we're in the process now of, in fact, leasing another part of the Transport Board to UCAL, which is the Mangrove location, so that they can do even more work for the Transport Board. And further, I don't want to preempt Cabinet, but except to say that I would have given a report to the Social Partnership about the rationalization of all of government's workshops. And UCAL will not only play an important part in the Transport Board and fixing and maintaining the vehicles for the Transport Board, but we want to even extend it to maintaining and fixing vehicles for all of government, which would expand the UCAL's position and be able to assist UCAL not only in the amount of work that it has, but also expand it in terms of training. We've also discussed with people who are interested in bringing electric buses that they will have to train the UCAL members to be able to maintain and fix electric buses. So UCAL members will be getting opportunities on many other vehicles, and also an opportunity to learn and be trained on the new vehicles as well as we go forward. So the way the ministry sees it, and the way I'm sure the Prime Minister sees it, is that UCAL will be playing a very integral role to this country as we go forward into the new years.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And indeed, I want to echo the sentiment that would have been shared in this lower chamber since we started this morning. And I want to congratulate the public servants for coming here this afternoon to indeed present the Ministry of Public Works plan for the year. And this speaks to the level of cooperation that we need in an effort to move this country forward. And indeed, we take this as an honor by these well-established and esteemed men and women to give of their service in their Lord Chamber, and I thank you. But Madam Chair, I will pick up from where my colleague from St. Michael East left off, because the genesis of UCAL speaks to
Honourable Member, just to remind you, it's the Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
The genesis of UCAL speaks to an enfranchisement, workers' enfranchisement program that was started by this very administration, the Barbados Labour Party, at a time when we were in government. And it speaks to how we see our people, our technical people, and generally people on a whole, to empower our people to move to the next level and indeed to focus on development in all areas with people at the forefront. But I want to ask a question with respect to UCAL. Is UCAL, I heard the minister in his very thorough preamble speak to UCAL being trained in certain areas to deal with electric buses, and I presume he means maintenance. But is UCAL equipped? And when I'm speaking about equipped, I'm talking about not just equipment, but in terms of the necessary training to indeed carry out comprehensive, preventative, and predictive maintenance. Because when we look at what has happened in the past, the fleet cannot run itself. A fleet cannot maintain itself. A fleet has to rely, and when I say fleet, I mean the buses, have to rely on a comprehensive, predictive, and preventative maintenance plan. And that was lacking in the past, and that is why we have that low number of buses running on the road. And I'm afraid that if we do not, we can buy all the electric buses, and if we don't put a comprehensive, predictive, and preventative maintenance plan in place, and the last government echoed sentiments that they did such, but yet we had challenges. So that is my question to you, Minister, and I know you have the Chairman of Transport Board here, and I would like you to tell the Chamber if UCAL is indeed equipped to handle predictive and preventative maintenance. And if not, what plans you have to address predictive and preventative maintenance so as to maintain a high level of fleet availability.
Thank you very much, Minister. Clearly, the mechanics and the service providers at UCAL will have to be trained once electric buses are available and running on our roads. And a comprehensive training program would be put in place so that the manufacturers will come down and not only offer the service on the ground, but also that training, which is absolutely necessary. And you're 100% correct that they have to be maintained, because a bus is not like a car. A bus does hundreds and hundreds of miles, working 8, 12, 16 hours a day. So obviously, they would have to be trained to be able to keep those buses running on the roads. Bear in mind, however, that by not having a combustion engine in it, electric bus, we are told, by having less moving parts, the maintenance is a little bit less. But what happens on the other side is they're much more technologically advanced. So they might have a lot more computers in them and a greater need for technical support. But I also want to give over to my PS first, who also will be able to address the concept of the training for the electric buses. Mr. Cummins.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, Chairman of Committees and all honorable members. As the Minister pointed out, we recognize that as we move towards electrification, we will have to put a comprehensive training program in place. And this is a part of the tender document, which we expect will be evaluated sometime within the next week, certainly within the next 2 weeks. And training forms a major component of the package, because as Minister Duguid said, these buses will be working 12, 14, 16 hours, and we must have a proper maintenance program in place. And also, given what we currently have, when we get the electric buses, certainly in the first year, those electric buses in themselves will not be of a sufficient number to augment the fleet of the Transport Board, whereby our current diesel buses will be able to put them aside. So as old as some of the buses are, we still have to put a preventive maintenance program in place. Regrettably, it has not been done for a long time, and as a result of that, we have suffered numerous breakdowns, and there's been significant inconvenience to the public. But training is very critical. Within the last 3 weeks, we at the ministry, we have met with the Barbados vocational board, looking at mechanics and also training, and even us ourselves, as we move to procure new equipment, we must have a significant focus on autotronics, because that is the way the world has gone today, and it is our duty, and we will certainly ensure that we are well equipped to not only service the electric buses, but we will be well equipped to service the new equipment that the ministry will be procuring very shortly.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
A couple of questions. The first one, I suspect I know the answer to, but I believe the minister deserves an opportunity to speak to the country about it. People would have recognized that obviously good work was done on highway improvements in Barbados. But the question, obviously, I'm sure the minister has heard, lingering on the lips of persons, would be, what is the rationale behind starting on major highways when there is a considerable demand in a number of places around Barbados where the population of or the community is heavily populated. Obviously, you will forgive me if I draw, for example, the reference to Riss Road in Fitz Village, as opposed to the highway that would have been done before. But the answer, I think, the rationale in the mind of the ministry and its officials is what I think the country needs to hear.
Thank you, Minister, for that. I would have spoken to it before, but I'm happy to repeat it. And Minister Phillips will also speak to it, I believe, as well as it relates to the roads. This program that we started was the 5 sample roads that was done under the IDB program. This was, in fact, a program that had been negotiated prior to this administration coming to office. And I, too, asked the question, why were we doing these roads, which appear to the average person as reasonable, whereas there are other roads that seem to need more attention. And our project personnel gave me the rationale, and quite widely I understand it fully. They assessed 65 roads. The American Development Bank assessed first 65 roads, and they assessed them based on certain criteria. The criteria involved the deterioration of the road, the contribution that that road makes to the economy, the speed at which that road, people travel on that road, and also the cost if we left that road alone. I think there may have been 1 or 2 I missed out, but I'm going from memory. But when they assessed made all the assessments and made the calculations, the IDB's consultant then came to the conclusion that these, of the 65 roads that they had assessed, these 15 roads were the first roads to be done. And of those 15, they picked out 5 as sample roads. Now, I must also draw your attention that the contractors have actually been using a newer and different aggregate for these roads, and not the limestone that we're accustomed using and that kind of grit. Granite, as I understand it, was brought in. Granite was actually brought in from Italy, specifically for these roads as a sample. So they're actually using a better aggregate to make a better and stronger road that would last longer. So the IDB approved the process of picking out of the 65 roads. They whittled that down by virtue of those criteria. The biggest one, of course, not only the economic impact on the country, but more importantly, the cost it would be if we had left it and not done it based on the rate and the state of deterioration on that road at the time. So those roads were identified and they've been programmed, first 5 and then the next 10, which I would have alluded to thereafter.
Supplemental? Okay. Honorable member for St. Philip West.
Minister, I see you have in your strategic goals a plan to alleviate and to mitigate against flooding. I want to know basically what that will entail, and more importantly, for the good people of Mangrove, Woodburn, and Foursquare in St. Philip West, what action are you prepared to take during this period?
Thank you very much, Minister. I think I will give the opportunity to our Director of Drainage, Mr. Jason Bowen, to come and answer you directly on that question.
In terms of wire drainage plan, we are going to be carrying out significantly more inspections of our stormwater wells. We are aware of, especially in the Woodburn area, especially last year, there was significant flooding in that area. There were other areas like Enterprise, Bayland, and so forth. There was significant flooding. We are planning to intensify some more well maintenance in the area, especially Woodburn. There are a significant number of wells in that area which are in need of repair as well as cleaning, and those we have scheduled for maintenance to occur.
I just wanted to add to that. Part of the problem as well is how we dispose of garbage, plastics and paper and those kinds of things, and how we dispose of these kinds of garbage pieces. They go and they get into the wells and they clog the wells and they clog the drains, and they cause a significant problem for us. And it's one of the reasons why we're banning those type of single-use plastics. And I think what we have to also get involved with and launch is an education program for the people of Barbados to recognize that when they throw the snow cone cup out, or when they throw whatever it may be, the plastic bags or whatever, that's not the end of it. That plastic bag will go and block up the drain near your house, and you may be contributing to the flooding of your own house by the way that you dispose of your garbage. And I think that we as a people have to raise our level of understanding that how we dispose of things must go to that higher level. We must get into recycling. We must realize that everything that we do can have an impact on us, and also take care of your surroundings as well. If you see the well near your area is getting clogged with garbage, you take it upon yourself and clear that area, because it may have an impact on you if you get storm water coming and your house may be the one flooding. And this is what we used to do as a people. And I don't know what has happened, and I think we need to get back to that community spirit, get back to helping your neighbor, maintaining your surroundings and maintaining your environment, because it may not only have an impact on you, but also your neighbors.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. John.
What's up? I'm asking questions that are coming from constituents in St. John. I have two questions, Madam Chair. First, we have been suffering for I don't know how many years as a result of the poor road network. And repeatedly, residents of St. John, we have been calling the depot only to be told that there's a problem with hot mix. Now, we're told that there's a need to have LPOs to have the hot mix to fix these roads. And I have problems in Sherburne, I have problems in Henley, I have problems at Wakefield. I could go on and on. So my first question is, what is really the process in order for the supervisor manager at the Bath depot to get hot mix to fix these roads? As it relates to the roads, I am seeing in your document as well, Haynes Hill being identified as a road to be fixed. Now, Haynes Hill has been in this state for approximately 8 years. So my question is, when are we going to have some resolutions to these particular issues with the road? Madam Chair, I have one follow-up question.
Do you have a WhatsApp from St. Philip North?
Yes, I saw those questions too, Madam Chair.
Carry on.
I saw, so ditto St. Philip North.
what I will do at this stage, Minister, is I will ask the Minister in the Ministry, who happens to be your neighbour here in Parliament, the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, to address the matter of your roads.
Yes, Honourable Member for St. John. First, to answer your question, the process, basically, there's a depot in St. John, Bath, and there's a senior technician who's responsible for about 2 to 3 depots in the area, including yours of Bath. He is the person that would make the requisition. We have our Deputy CTO acting, Mr. Philip Tudor, to the left of Minister Duguid, to whom those requisitions would go, and then he would see that the depot is satisfied with what has been requested. I will give him the opportunity to say something, to make some comments on that. But further to that, if the depot has hot mix and there's no equipment, then there's a problem. And the problem in the ministry that we inherited and we are attempting to fix, you would have heard Minister Duguid speak about the equipment, and I would want to, as a government, as a new government, as a matter of fact, the Honourable Prime Minister gave us $10 million up front. Perhaps this was the first time that something like this would have happened. $10 million up front to get equipment so that we can begin to work as seriously as we would like to on the road network across this country. I will now hand over to our Deputy CTO, Mr. Tudor, to shed some further light as far as this question is concerned.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. You'll be pleased to know that within another 2 weeks, the NCL will be paved. We had challenges with our equipment, as Minister Duguid and Minister Phillips alluded to, in that the equipment basically is around 20 years old. And we should be expecting, as Minister Duguid said, we should be expecting another $10 million in equipment fairly shortly. And therefore, I believe that your problems with patching and paving of roads will be alleviated to some great extent.
Supplemental?
Before we get to the supplemental, I also want to add, for the benefit of the member for St. John, that also in the estimates, the Bath depot is in a terrible state. And in fact, the people there are in a container. And we have in our estimates some monies approved, well, once we approve these estimates here, to build a new depot for the people at Bath. And obviously, you cannot get good work sometimes if you're asking people to live in or to occupy difficult or cramped surroundings. And I think once we can get that depot done, we would then be expecting excellent work then from the members of the depot at Bath as well. So you can go back and tell them that once these estimates are passed, the Bath depot will be getting a new spanking facility.
A follow-up question, twin problems in St. John and also St. Philip North.
Thank you.
The bus system. Now, the constituents of St. John, they are aware of the problems that we're having with the buses. The issue is that all of the routes in St. John are concerned that you have a situation where they're in the stalls, for want of a better description, and you're seeing other routes moving buses 2 and 3 times before they get a single bus. Now, my question to you is if the ministers are satisfied with the management of what is going on within the different terminals, because it can't be a case where you have someone in there and they're sending a bus with 6 or so passengers 3 times before a bus with a line with, 40, 50 people. And this is the case, like I said, for every single route in St. John, to the extent where constituents are believing now that they're being victimized again. So my question to you, are you satisfied with the management at the particular locale where these buses are coming out?
Thank you, Minister. First, let me say, maybe you started the concept with WhatsApp, so I guess I will follow on from the WhatsApp and say that I get lots of WhatsApp messages because I have made a decision to make my telephone number public, and I guess that is the burden I have to carry for doing that. But my WhatsApp lights up when there's a problem with buses, and I get more messages about buses and the availability of buses and the need for buses to get to schools or to get to St. Joseph or St. John than any other thing. Oh, definitely St. Thomas, the Sturgis Road especially, or any other thing. And the bus service is a real problem for us. There's no question. We should have 170, I believe, buses. Some days we're down to 57. We had 100 when we first started the school term, but the Kirk situation caused a lot of buses, 40 buses, I believe, to be knocked out. And we're slowly getting back to the number of buses. So bus availability is a big problem. Route rationalization is another aspect that we have to do. I didn't get to mention it in the preamble, but we're in the process of going through what's called the TAP program, which is the Transport Augmentation Program, which will give us an opportunity to see private PSVs come and help us augment the service that the Transport Board gives, and we look forward to having that program going. But I have to my left here the chairman of the Transport Board, and I'll ask him also to elaborate on your issue as it relates to your bus availability, particularly in the parish of St. John.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Gregory Nichols, I apologize.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Minister. The question of bus availability is the biggest challenge we have at Transport Board right now. And having come on since June last year, we have recognized that it is a multifaceted problem. A number of the buses that we have are stretched from 22 years to 16 years old. And the real lifespan of a bus that works the long hours, Minister mentioned 16, but in some cases in excess of 20 hours every day over such a long period of time. We have a lot of breakdowns because we have not renewed the fleet by bringing in new buses into the fleet since 2006. So that one of the large challenges that we face is that the buses are very old and they have been serviced for many and many years without being replaced as they ought to have been replaced. I heard one of your other ministerial colleagues speak about preventive maintenance. That is not something that existed when we came on as a board, and it is really very difficult to really plan how you are going to service the routes. We need about 178 buses to service the current route network and scheduling. So we've had to reduce that over the course of the years. As Minister indicated, we plan to increase our service offerings by integrating the public sector vehicles on certain routes as a trial basis. And we've also sent out for tender, which we've received 2 bids for the supply of electric buses. It's going to take a while before we get back to optimal number, but our ability to service all of the buses is constrained by the revenue that we earn. Because when we are down into the 50s, it means that your budgeted targets of in excess of 100 buses is almost cut by 1/2. So we find that we are constrained by not having sufficient revenue. One of the other challenges we find is that the availability of some parks. There was a program at Mangrove which we suspended and terminated that program in July last year, in which Transport Board would have attempted to fix buses and the engines and build engines afresh and that kind of stuff. And it would have diverted about $5 to $6 million out of into that project. And we had to terminate that project because it yielded no results. And what we found was that a number of the suppliers of the parks, especially in Brazil, stopped fabricating these parts, because after 2 or 3 years and the orders for buses that are made in 1997 and 2000 and 2004, if there's a consistent ordering of these parts, you would fabricate them. But after 2 or 3 years, when the manufacturers realize that these old parts are no longer in use, they stop manufacturing these parts. So we found that when we came in, after that project came on, it is difficult now to get those parts from the original suppliers of these parts, because over the last 2 or 3 years they've stopped manufacturing these parts. So that has been a challenge for us as well. And as it relates to the routes, we've had situations, unhappily, Minister, where the times for picking up school children have gone beyond reasonable time. Some instances after 6 o'clock. Especially in schools, the Lodge School, for example, Grantley Adams suffers, Allen schools to a certain extent, and it is really, really unreasonable to expect a parent to be worrying about their children when it gets dark and a bus has not arrived at the school. We have asked management to be more creative in the way in which the scheduling of drivers has been set out, and we have insisted that the schools must come first. Quite a number of primary schools are now serviced by Transport Board on evenings as well. So the scheduling out of the terminals around the 2:30 to 3 o'clock period has changed, and to meet that demand, and then they go and loop and come back down to Bridgetown. So that is why you get the long periods of waiting in the terminals after the 4 o'clock period going up. But it's a challenge, and we are trying to do our very, very best. The plan is to acquire...
Sir, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The plan is to acquire 120 electric buses. We hope that we will be able to sign off and send a recommendation to Cabinet within the next 2 weeks as to the selection, which bid we have selected or suggested for selection, and then we will go into the pre-contract phase and rolling out of that plan. And we hope that we will be able to try to alleviate that problem towards the end of this year. But we have to do better. We also are looking at pulling out some of the existing diesel engines in a conversion project, but that is our pilot phase now with Endless Electric and Williams Industries. But that project now has to be tested to see how we can adapt to it, because that is a much cheaper option than buying a brand new electric bus.
Last question.
All right, I understand the situation, but my question was related directly to scheduling. In terms of the supervisor at the location coming and looking at the gates to see, I mean, is it a case where drivers are averse to going in particular routes? Because if this one, there are 50, 60 people here and there's 6 here, why send 3 buses here and none at this location? So my question is, looking specifically at scheduling and if drivers are averse to going on certain routes.
Minister, it's not an issue of drivers being averse to going to certain routes as far as I am aware. I think the problem stems from the fact that there's a shift system in place. And that shift system would have been in place when we had in excess of 200 buses on the roads. And the change of shift really creates a challenge for management. Now we are down on our bus numbers. We have asked as a board for management to be more creative and share some of the burden around, because it is very difficult to understand why a particular route or routes face the same challenge every day, whereas other routes are serviced for buses. So when the numbers are down, it is expected reasonably that every bus, every route would get a touch of delay on some days. So that is one of the challenges that we've asked management to address. And I've asked the acting general manager to directly to work with the operations team to ensure that there's a much wider distribution in terms of how we are able to accommodate those routes which suffer long delays.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the chairman for that comment about the effort that will be made to ensure better scheduling of buses, because in St. James South there is significant suffering in relation to some areas not getting, like West Terrace, not getting a bus for hours and hours. They probably see maybe 2 or 3 a day, if so much. And I want to congratulate the team on the Stadium Road. That has been one of the biggest reliefs to Barbadian drivers, and it is really very well done. It was done very, very quickly, and I want to congratulate you on it. The issue that I want to raise, however, is the issue of the 298 employees who were sent home. That is a large number, and that can be very painful. I remember our Prime Minister outlining to us, however, that when we were walking through how best to deal with this very dangerous economic situation that Barbados found itself in, and in trying to find ways to be able to cut $500 million from out of our expenditure and to relieve the pressure on the fiscal space, that in order to, if we had to rely on only labor to carry the burden, we would have had to dismiss at least 10,000 people, and that would have been a major catastrophe for Barbados. So a lot of effort was made into finding different ways that restructuring, etc., different ways to spread the burden so we would not have to hit the civil service that hard. The issue is, although we were some people in the central government service, your particular ministry had one of the biggest hits, the 298. And I noticed that in your road building program, you have over $10 million worth of road construction happening. The question I want to find out is, are there going to be opportunities for some of the people who have been released to be able to find some kind of work? Because at the end of the day, people still need to put food on the table, and they still need to pay their bills. And I want to know if you'll be able to find work for them, and approximately how many people you think you'll be able to employ in the roads program.
Thank you, Minister. First, let me say that obviously that was a big number that the ministry had to see go. And what we've been doing is we've been offering some contracts for our road weeding program, for instance, to some of the people who are retrenched. As you're aware, that the government is going to be embarking on a digitization program with the IDB, which I understand will commence shortly, and that will take care of the stenotypists and some of the clerical typists that we had as well. And we're looking forward to that program starting urgently so that we'll be able to reposition those people. And we've also would have made representation to contractors who would get some of that those road contracts, that they would look favorably employing some of our heavy-duty general workers who were involved in road construction, so that we'd be able to reposition those people to get them work. So we are aware and cognizant that it has been a major blow and a major hit not only to the ministry but to these people and their families, and we've been trying wherever possible to try to reposition them either as a contract worker or as workers with the contractors that are going to be getting that amount of work. And what was interesting is when we met with the contractors, they made it clear that the minor roads, which is less mechanized, are the greater number of, that is the place that they would need the greater number of workers, more so than the large IDB program, which is essentially mechanized. But more labor intensive would be the minor roads, like the CAF roads, for instance. I don't know if Minister Phillips wanted to add anything to that as well.
Yes, thank you, Minister. In addition to that, it's just not the CAF roads. The ministry itself embarks on work in terms of tenantry roads and those residential roads and so on. And we'll be looking to assist in that regard, because as the minister said, once you have contracts out there, the contract, in other words, what we're looking at is contract for services rather than being on government's payroll. That has been the problem, that has been the bugbear for a number of years, and obviously the ministry and government generally cannot continue in that fashion. But we are very cognizant of the fact that people have families, and we don't want to stop people from being able to look after their families and so on, because that then creates another problem, a social problem for us. So the ministry will be looking favorably that wherever possible, and we can work with, we had the discussion with contractors. Once that contracts are given, we've asked them to look favorably on those workers who would be competent, because they would have been trained and working actually especially in the area of road construction and so on. Because we, as a ministry, will be more focusing now on road maintenance. So we have to depend on those many contractors out there. Once contracts are given, that they will look favorably on the persons from the ministry who would have been retrenched and are very skilled in that area, to assist them in terms of employment, that they can be able to look after their families.
I just follow up?
But I just want to, I don't think my time is expired. I just want to go.
Please, no, honorable member, that I don't think your time is additive.
Okay.
It's a good try, though. But I give you that answer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add to that as well, that I understand that the port is going to be doing some construction as well, and we're hoping to be able to position some of our workers there as well.
Thank you. Supplementary?
I'm very, very glad to hear that, because that will bring some relief to people who are really feeling the strain of the adjustment. I want to raise a question, and I'm hoping you'll be able to give me a very clear answer. In St. James South, we have been making an effort to start and do some cleanup around our communities. One of the things I recognize is that...
I remember, I'll allow it this time, but this is not supplementary to your previous question. But go on.
Oh,
just
no, I can wait and come again. That's fine.
Sure. Honourable member for St. George North.
The ministry staff, I think you have inherited a really great staff, and I want to compliment you for doing a good job with the limited resources that you have. This ministry touches the life of ordinary people as well as people from all walks of life. And I want to ask several questions, for example, road marking, signs, traffic management. I think that is a number of little things that you don't have to have a big set of staff to mark the roads. People in Rose Park will call me and say, look, the roads need marking. Traffic management on mornings, you can't get people from St. Philip have to wait 3 hours to get past Bussa. What have you been doing really to improve traffic management in this country? Because it seems to me that since we left the ministry in 2007, very little has happened. I also want to ask the question in terms of, well, persons have asked about the buses already, and I don't want to dwell on that, but it's a known fact that many people stay at a bus pool for 3 and 4 hours. Last weekend, I had to drop a young lady from St. George to St. Philip with 2 children. And it's really serious. You have this, and people can't get buses to Flat Rock. You have a transport authority that seems to be not working. And I want to find out what is really happening, because if a transport authority could sit down and allow a ministry to put 200 buses on Silver Sand route, this means that the whole transport authority is not functioning. And that was the way Transport Authority was set up in the first place. So the ministry has to function in a way. I heard that in the workshop you don't have any mechanics. And, you know, I guess Mr. Tudor will tell me that he can't pass the roads in St. George because they have no trucks in the whole zone for a whole 3 months. And this is really unfortunate because, as I say, it touches the life of everybody. you have drainage. So what is the ministry really doing really at this time? We have no trucks, no patch material, you have no men, you have no workers. What are you really doing at this point in time?
First, let me acknowledge that the member for St. George North was a former Minister of Transport and Works. So therefore, he would understand the inner workings of that ministry better. Well, the only other person better would be the member for St. Andrew, who was also a former minister. And I also would have to say that I know that the honourable member for St. George North would not be, being such a good member of Parliament, he would never be averse to giving a young lady at a bus stop a lift to wherever she was going. So let me first make that very clear to all and sundry here. The ministry has, as I said in my preamble, has embarked on a major program of getting equipment, getting supplies, and repositioning our labour. And I'm very proud of the way that the ministry is working, and we are getting a lot done with limited resources, and I'm 100% sure that we would get even more done when we get better resources. With respect to the road marking and so on, I'm going to hand over to our Chief Technical Officer, Ms. Cheryl Bennett-Innes, but just to say that we've already negotiated with the union to start road painting at night, because we recognize that road painting during the day, it can give problems to traffic, and the Prime Minister mandated that we had that done, and the PS worked assiduously with the unions, and we've already started our road painting at night. We think we're about to do or are nearly done the Bussa area, but we are working to get the road painting done predominantly at night. And the PS is telling me that we were working on Highway 1 last week, doing road painting at night. But I want to hand over to our Chief Technical Officer, who can better answer the former Minister of Transport and Works.
Thank you, Minister Chair. To answer the question with respect to traffic management, there are quite a wide range of options that we have for traffic management. They range from this most simple, that you can make one-way streets or no entry streets, restrict right turns, that sort of thing, right up to doing a complete recirculation, traffic circulation in an area. One that we are currently working on that has been placed back on our plate, it's been there before, is the pedestrianization concept of Broad Street. That will require, we've already started to work on that, and a proposal will be coming forward, I believe, through the Minister for the Cabinet to make a determination on shortly. We already spoke about the road markings. We have started doing some road markings at night. I'd like to applaud the workers at the Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, because they were the ones that were first off willing to work at night. They were quite keen on working at night, and then, as Minister said, when we had the meetings with the unions, then we were able to work out the details of how that would happen, and that has started, and so far we found it's been working very well. It makes it a lot easier for them. It's cooler for them at night to work at night, and it's a lot less traffic on the road. There are other traffic management options that you can put in. I mentioned the lower end, but the higher end could be actually restricting the number of vehicles that we allow into the country in the first place. That is on the extreme side. So you have quite a wide range of things in between there that you can try. There's park and ride. There is trying to carpool. The ministry, for instance, the staff, we all came down in vehicle together, so we're stuck here until the end. But so there are lots of things that if you're creative, changing your hours of work, for instance, everyone does not have to get to work at 8 o'clock. We can work with the Ministry of Education. I think the St. Michael's School is one school that has changed their times. They did it when they were doing, I believe, renovations at the school. Worked so well that they've kept it. So there are lots of things that the ministry does not have to be the ones to necessarily bring it in, but you yourself can consider varying your times of work if that's allowable with your bosses, and just being at work at a common time where everybody has to be there, that sort of thing. So there's a wide range that we are looking at and that we're thinking of implementing. Park and ride is always on the table. Unfortunately, with park and ride, we have to have the units to be able to move the people. And as you heard from the Transport Board, we are down on those units, but we can also consider looking at the private sector. Ross University, for instance, has been using a shared service. They bus their students in and out of their university location at the Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center. So there's a wide range of things that we're looking at, and we don't give up. We will incrementally implement them, see how they work. If they don't work, then we will change them and continue going from there. It's a process that never ends because traffic changes every day. The situation on the road changes every day, so we have to continually monitor it and try different things, see what works, keep it, and if it doesn't work, then modify it or change it to something else.
I would love to ask you about the flyovers, but my job does not permit me. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
I have a supplementary.
Sorry, supplementary.
Yes.
And please don't put 3 questions in one like the last time.
I want to find out about the signage because I think signage is supposed to be a simple thing. And there's still a number of areas that have no signage at all. I know that you have new creative ways of improving signage across Barbados, and this has been one of the problems that we have inherited, and I know it's something that you have been adamant about, but we definitely need to see improved signage across Barbados. Many tourists come here and sometimes don't know where to go, and even though you have the GPS now, many people do not know where certain places are. So I think the ministry needs to look at some simple things to look at this whole question of signage. My question on Transport Authority was not answered, and that referred to what was done in the last administration, where the Transport Authority allowed too many buses on one route. And I want to find out if the ministry is still allowing this entity to just do as it likes. Who would be the person to ensure to put 200 buses on one route?
Thank you very much, Member for St. George North. I think the problem why your question was answered is because you put 3 in one as opposed to 1 at a time, which would have given us a better chance to answer them, and it would have given us 5 minutes per question rather than 5 minutes for 3 questions. So, but what I've done is I've brought forward the director of the chairman. Actually, is going to come and answer your question, Mr. Ian Eswick, the chairman of the Transport Authority. Bear in mind, he's only been the chairman since the new government has been in place.
Madam Chair, honorable members, the situation that we found when we came in to board on June the 5th, it was quite distressing because we had seen a number of instances where caps that were set by cabinet had been carelessly exceeded. It has caused us some problems in that, in addition to the excesses, there remain a number of approval letters which will constitute further permits if they were activated. What we have done is to try to get a handle on the exposure of the permits themselves. We have made some changes, instituted a number of constraints, I will say, where first we decided that we had to curtail the issuing of permits for all categories except hire cars. And I think we later realized through a process of accounting that there was some leeway in the category of maxi taxis, the ZM category. But we have a real serious problem in the ZR, the route taxis, and the minibuses. The honourable member quite rightly referred to a flooding of the market, and we have about 4 routes that are particularly affected. One is Silver Sands, the other is Silver Hill, and then we've got Fairy Valley. I don't quite remember the 4th one now, but what we have been trying to do, Bashal. What we've been trying to do is to remove some of the units from off these overcrowded routes and reassign them to the routes that are less well serviced. This has already started. We were fortunate in that we've had requests from some of the operators on the overcrowded routes for transfers to the less service routes. That unfortunately has not provided us with the numbers that we would be satisfied with. So we are embarking on a program where we will be removing them, the excess units, that is, over a period of time. The Transport Authority has just been, well, we've just decided that all of the permits will now have to be renewed through the Transport Authority rather than the Barbados Licensing Authority, in that we will now be the ones to provide approval letters for those permits. And we hope that by a process of consultation, we would be able to persuade other operators or just do what we will have to do to make sure that the numbers are spread evenly across the landscape.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to refer Minister and your colleagues to subprogram 498, which is the Calf Road rehabilitation that you referenced in your opening remarks. And in particular to one of the roads that you identified to be rehabilitated under this program, which is Flagstaff Road. Flagstaff Road has been a thorn in the side of the residents of the area for St. Michael South Central for some time, dating back to the last administration. All of the funds, I am advised, having some responsibility for the Ministry of Economic Affairs and therefore the Public Investment Unit that manages the public sector investment program under which this falls. I am advised that all of the resources have been disbursed from CAF to the Government of Barbados and so are available to be expended on the project. Under the last administration, it appeared as if the delays, the considerable delays on the finishing of the road had to do with how they managed the resources under the project and how they were able or unable to meet the payment commitments to the contractor. I'm sure in your response you will tell us something about this. That road has been in a state of terrible disrepair for some time. I note and I thank you and your colleagues for finishing half the road, but unless I am only going halfway, I'm sure the residents will want the rest of the road finished. So my question to you is the following. Given that the resources have been fully dispersed to the Government of Barbados and so it is not strictly a resourcing issue, what assurance can you give us that the delays will be a thing of the past and that this road will be soon completed?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I do agree with you that this road has been going on for some time. We have had some challenges, and notwithstanding having had to go back to Cabinet and to come to Parliament to make a change with regards to having the funding to pay the contractor at some point in time, soon after we came into office. We, as you rightly said, we would have been able to pave late last year about 200 meters from of the road, and currently we are now working on the remaining 490 meters. We understand the inconvenience caused to the residents, and we had directed our deputy CTO, under who's responsible in terms of the road, so to speak, to meet with residents and offer an apology on the behalf of the ministry. So we will be following closely, myself and Minister Duguid. This is a matter that has been raised quite often at our management meetings with regards to having that road completed as quickly as possible. And of course, there are other roads that might have been started and persons have been affected, and we are looking to minimize or eliminate, as a matter of fact, any inconvenience that has been caused or is being caused to residents in the respective areas. And I wouldn't want to give a definitive date as such as saying to you the end of this month or so, but very, very soon. And we will be following through on this to ensure that the road at Flagstaff in particular, which concerns you as the Member of Parliament for that area, and rightly so, that is completed quite quickly.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
I am obliged, Madam Chair, and I want to preface my remarks by just making the observation that I genuinely believe that, having observed this estimates process for several years now, the head that we are now debating or discussing, though frequently raised, has always seemed to be carrying the undertone of an entity, a transport sector that is lagging behind the rest of Barbados in terms of its ability to keep pace with technology, keep pace with new initiatives, and so on. And that works to the detriment of the average Barbadian who is dependent on the transport sector and on your ministry, ministers. The fact of the matter is that you have 6 terminal spaces for commuters across this island. Oistins, Pitestown, Princess Alice, Cheapside, Fairchild Street, I think Constitution River. And people every single day, and I don't want to appear only to be focusing on my constituents, but I go nationwide because I think that there's no difference anywhere you go in Barbados in this regard. People every single day are going to these terminals, waiting on transportation, but they have absolutely no connection between where the vehicles are at any given time and how they are going to get the service they want. They have little or no knowledge about a breakdown that might take place en route and how they will be otherwise affected. And as we've already heard the chairman make the point, very often it comes to pass that the unintended consequence, I am sure, of this situation is that little children might be in a bus stand after dark and parents are disconnected from that child, wondering at home how the child is, where it is, and obviously that is undesirable as well. Now, I am asking, to what extent is your ministry working on any projects, and to what extent can you finance any projects which can help make use of a simple piece of technology like the cell phone I have in my hand, being able to connect passengers, commuters to real-time information about where vehicles are and how services might have been affected or are being affected, so that we obviate the necessity for people to be left out in the cold and feeling that they are dispossessed of information and suffering a bad service as a result of that. I have a follow-up, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much, the member for St. James Central. First to say, you having known me for a very long time, know I'm not averse to using technology. And I am very much technology driven, and I think that we've been bringing a lot of technology and new technology to the ministry. And we are looking at a program, you may be familiar, it's actually called, this one service provider called Beat Bus, which gives people real-time information as to where the bus is. I believe there's some buses that already have it. And it's not only buses, it's also being available to some public service vehicles. And what you essentially do is you download an application onto your phone, and through that application you can get real-time through GPS locators as to the location of where a particular bus is. And in fact, we're hoping to marry that with our transport augmentation program so that all of those B buses that we're hoping to bring on that program will also have that GPS available, so that not only you can see where a bus is at a particularly given time, but you can also make sure that the bus is completing the whole route and not just going half of the route and turning back. So there are certain benefits to using technology, and I'm also going to ask the chairman of the Transport Board to give it the use of that technology as it relates to the Transport Board. Also, we're also looking at a cashless system where you can pay for your ride using your phone or using a card rather than using cash as well. So technology is very much where we're looking to go, because we have to bring all of our services into the new age and use technology wherever possible to get those savings. But I'm going to ask the chairman to also elaborate on the cashless system and the GPS using to be able to track Beat Bus and applications like that.
Thank you, Minister Duguid. The Transport Board right now is in the process of negotiating with a number of service providers so we can make a selection in relation to the cashless system and our fleet management systems to be integrated into our buses. In about September, October last year, we did a request for proposals, and we received a number of very well-constructed proposals. And the infusion of technology into what we do see this as a very important area to increase revenue, because you will recognize, Minister, that the estimated or the allocated amount of the subvention has been reduced in these estimates, so that revenue generation from the use of technology, for example, when we are thinking about bringing Wi-Fi technology onto our Transport Board buses. When a passenger comes onto the bus and taps into the Wi-Fi, they either go through their social media profile or they go into tap into the Wi-Fi. We can collect a database, and that database is now available for about 30,000 commuters per month. And we can use that database to attract advertising revenue, because once you go on to that portal, you'll be required now to listen to an ad or to have streaming advertising. And so this kind of technology is also gives us the ability to raise revenue. We are also looking at the way in which we display information about the buses and the services in terminals. The GPS tracking and integrated with the camera systems can also give parents the opportunity to have a kind of a real-time view, a panoramic view of what is going on a school bus leaving, say, for example, law school at 4 o'clock. And if my son says he's at law school, I can check and see that this bus is at Charles Road Bridge. And perhaps any of the businesses in Charles Road Bridge, when you tap onto it at that point in time, can stream their ads. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to integrate the technology to the benefit of the organization going forward.
My follow-up, ma'am, if I may, because I'm heartened by the responses that I am getting. I want to underscore again that I feel that the infusion of technology into the business of the ministry is very important from the perspective of empowering commuters in Barbados. And obviously, if you empower my constituents, you please me. I feel, ministers, that the question of
the taxi services in Barbados is also an area that I should address to you from the perspective also as Minister of Tourism, because my ministry relies on yours for a collaboration on improving and empowering Barbadians and visitors as well. Now, speaking specifically to infusion of technology, the shared services platform, much like the shared accommodation sector, the Airbnbs and so on is the shared accommodation sector. The shared services would be those things that you experience in North America and England. It is a global phenomenon where, again, via the use of your cell phone, you are able to hail a cab, and that cab could be shared by you and somebody else at the same time. It's an economic efficiency for you because you get from point A to point B very easily, and the passengers collectively are sharing the cost of the route, so it is cheaper, and so you benefit by speed, you benefit by cost, and you keep taxi men busy rather than sitting down in a square in Bridgetown for a whole day to get 10 passengers. The question that I'm asking is, to what extent, I'm offering you the opportunity, Minister, to share with the country to what extent your ministry is on board with that type of approach and where you see us going in that regard.
Yes, thank you, Minister. First, let me say that, and I'll be frank, there are applications called Uber and Lyft and so on, which are used internationally. We would prefer to look at a local provider. That's the first thing. And there was a company called Beep Cab that was providing a service, and there are other providers, and we're looking at encouraging and exposing local providers so that people coming to this country will be exposed that we do have a service. It might not be the service that they're accustomed to, but we have a local service. Further, when we do, I think when is the best answer, when we do institute that it will not be every person, unlike Uber and Lyft. It will be restricted to taxi operators who have a valid taxi permit. Because I don't think that we want to go the way at this time that any and everybody who has a car and who downloads an app will be taking our children and so on to and from places. I think that we want to limit it to people who are already permit holders, and those will be people that will be able to access the app, and they will be able to benefit from that service. I think I want to go further as well and say that we also want taxis to carry a metered system, because obviously that kind of service requires a metering rather than just point A to point B. And the metering is something that we're actively looking at. It will be going to Cabinet very, very shortly. There actually is already in the legislation a rate for metering. That will have to be assessed, and that is something that we're looking at. We're also looking that all taxis will have to be appropriately marked with taxi on the side of it, as well as having an appropriate taxi sign on top of the vehicle as well. And we want to get rid of what I call fake taxis. And this is a problem that we have in this country, and it was highlighted that there are people who apply for a taxi permit not because they want to transport people from A to B, but they want the opportunity to get the duty-free car 5 years down the road. And we're going to bring that to an end. And I'm tired and fed up with fake taxis in Barbados. And that is going to be coming to an end very, very shortly. So we are aware of what is happening, and we want to support and use technology to provide a better taxi service. And I want to go further, and I think the right person is asking the question, because we want to institute a rate, because it also cannot be that somebody takes a taxi from the airport to the port and is charged X dollars, and then takes another taxi from the seaport to the airport and is charged 3X dollars. That must be standardized, because clearly the person is going to feel that they have been in some way disadvantaged by one of the taxi operators. So we want to standardize it so that people understand that they're getting a proper fee, paying a proper amount for a proper service. And that is the way I think that we must go forward in the taxi service. I don't know if the chairman of the Transport Authority wants to add anything on that as well.
Yes, thank you, Minister. I would just like to elaborate on some of the technological ideas that we're looking at within the private public sector service. When we did take office at the Transport Authority, we realized that there had been some discussions regarding some aspects of technology, but we were able to bring one of them right now into fruition. That is that we've now got a complete database management system, which would give us information regarding permits, owners of the PSVs, addresses, drivers, the whole gamut. And I believe the minister spoke about the beat bus system as well. We're looking at that actively because we believe that is a system that will help us to manage and regulate the PSVs, particularly the routed PSVs in Barbados. Another one we're looking at is a next bus system, which will be used within the terminals. And we hope that this will give us the opportunity to make the terminals run more efficiently, and we may be able to save on some manpower there as well. And of course, there are opportunities to use smart cards, not only with the PSVs, but also with the transport board buses. And what is interesting about these smart cards is that I believe the data processing department is now looking at an ID card that can be loaded and be used as a smart card as well. So there are a lot of things on the horizon that we are looking at, and we hope to bring them into fruition very shortly.
Honourable Member Michael South.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Minister, I want to ask you a very quick question. First of all, let me say thanks to the public servants who came. And I've come to know many of the men who work in drainage, and that they work very, very hard. When it rains, I see those men walking through knee-high, waist-high water, trying to do the people's business, and I wish to commend them for the good work that they do. I must also tell you that I've come to know many of them by name and their habits, because I spend time with them almost every rainy season. And the reason that I have to spend time with them, though they're good men, and I would rather not, but the reason I have to spend time with them is because, as you are well aware, every time there is rain, the Bayland floods. And while I hear you, and there's no one in here who would support you greater than I would when it comes to the issue of plastics and the single-use plastics and styrofoam and the way that they clog the drains, you and I both know that the reason the Bayland and many other areas flood have very little to do with the plastics. And I was aware that the pump in the Bayland has been given issues for a long time. And I would like you to explain to my constituents why that is and why it hasn't been fixed, but more importantly for this conversation being a conversation on estimates. What are your plans going forward? I was told that a pump was acquired previously and that the problem was being addressed. I'm now being told that there's no such pump and that it now has to be acquired. I don't know what is the truth. I'm hoping you would clarify, but I do believe the people in St. Michael South, Clarks Avenue, Browns Avenue deserve some explanation as to why this issue remains and what your plans are going forward to address it. The situation is also the same in other places, but I won't mention them. But certainly I would like you to give some comfort to the people in my constituency, please.
Thank you very much to the member for St. Michael South. First, let me make it clear that the Bayland is my ancestral home. And you would recall that right in front of where the flooding was, I was able to introduce you to one of my cousins. But I introduced her as my cousin, which you may not have made the connection, even although her name is Dugid. Even although her name is Dugid, all of my ancestors lived in the Bayland. My father lived on Clarks Avenue, so therefore all of the people of Clarks Avenue and all of the surrounding areas, I have a vested interest in making sure that there isn't any flooding going on in that area of the Bayland. Just opposite, you'd remember. So we have definitely been able to source the pumps, and in fact, that has been in the estimates in the amount of, I believe, 85 million. So the pumps actually should be here before the next rainy season, I believe. And it is not only for that area. We also have looked at the Chapman Lane area and the Murphy pasture. And we have done the survey, completed the surveys in that area. And we're about to start digging out that area for the benefit of the member for the city of Bridgetown as well. And we've also sourced the repairs for the Princess Alice pump as well. I remember a previous member for the city of Bridgetown used to say, for any time there was even a drizzle, the first thing she would do, that would be the now Ambassador Dame Billy, the first thing she would do is go and make sure the pumps were working at Princess Alice. Because if those pumps aren't working, the city of Bridgetown is going to flood. And we've had some challenges. They were down to one pump, but we've got the parts. Well, we hope to get the parts soon to get back to the 3 pumps. First, to get the old pumps working, and these are very, very, very specialized pumps. Get the old pumps working, and then also we have in these estimates to purchase new pumps. So we recognize the issues, and we are working to make sure that we don't have a repeat of the problem, especially when somebody or some particular climate event called Kirk passes by Barbados. And I want to hand over to the member. I want to hand over to the director of drainage, who would also be able to talk about the pumps. No, let my people finish, and then you can bring up a supplementary question.
Oh, you're asking the same question?
Yeah, same question.
In terms of the Clark's Road pump in Bayland, the pump was repaired. At the time in question, when there was the rainfall event, the pump had malfunctioned, and that's why there was such significant flooding in the area. It was repaired, and we're hoping it should not repeat itself. It's automatic. It's on an automatic function, so it should function. In terms of the Murphy's pasture area, we had done a significant number of surveys in the area. The area is quite flat. There are areas in fact, the drain itself, there are depressions in the drain, so there's always ponding within the drain itself. There's a road which comes off of Chapman Lane, which terminates at the drain, by the drain itself. I can't remember the name of the road, but that also has depressions within it. So that is why also that area was also flooding. So our plans essentially would be to widen the drain at Murphy's pasture to accommodate more water and also to create a floodplain area utilizing the Murphy's pasture itself. Now that would increase the amount of, instead of, essentially what our plan is that we would rather the pasture flood before the community. So that is why we're creating a floodplain in the Murphy's pasture area. And we will also tackle the depressions on that side road off of Chapman Lane. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Well, thank you very much. I think I got the clarity that I was seeking. I just want to thank, of course, the Minister for the work that he is proposing to do and for the support that he obviously gave me in the last election. I do think, though, the people of St. Michael South deserve some explanation as to why the problem lingered. And why I'm asking this is because what was told to me was that the pump that is currently in the Bayland is meant to accommodate a certain amount of water, but when the water pressure or when there's a lot of water, it cannot accommodate it. Now, it makes no sense to have a pump meant to accommodate water that only cuts in when there's a significant amount of water, but cannot handle a significant amount of water. And that is the explanation that was given to me, and I do believe the people of St. Michael South, especially over the last few years, need to be given an explanation as to why it is. And many of the residents, during the time that there was flooding, the minister came as well, so he heard firsthand. We're saying, Minister, don't let them tell you that they're going to fix the problem because they always say so. And then the problem remains. So I would just like some explanation given as to why this thing has so lingered. And not only that, why there has been so little consultation with the people who were most affected by it.
Consultation.
okay, but it's still a part of the pump. And I think what we have to now do going forward is that, because what was happening is when the water was accumulating, the pump was not automatically switching on. So what we now have to do is not only make sure that it is repaired, but also make sure that it's appropriately secured. And I think that is the way forward.
Good. Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest. Get him out of the way.
Good evening, Minister, and to your team as well. I'm really speaking on the behalf of the disabled community when it comes to buses. And I know that the Transport Board had special buses strictly to serve the disabled community. And I would like to know if or how many of those buses, those disability buses, that are still operational. One. Second question, you also
Thank you to the member for St. Michael Northwest, and I'm going to hand over to the chairman of the Transport Board to answer that question specifically about the buses specific for the disabled community.
Thank you, Minister. In answer to the question from the honourable member, we have in use 2 specialized buses for the disabled community. Unfortunately, unlike some of the other older buses in our fleet, these suffer breakdowns from time to time, and we've had to utilize some of the smaller units in order to do the caller ride system that we have in relation to integrating the disabled into what we do. Going forward, all of the specifications for the brand new buses will carry bays for the disabled communities so they can be able to get onto the buses, but these also have to have special configurations because there's not a uniform height in all of our roads from curb so that we can mount without having to go over a bump. But these things are being looked at.
Supplementary.
Okay, thank you. Well, he mentioned that the new buses, the electric buses, will be retrofitted to accommodate the disabled community as well. Okay, thanks.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Chairman, let me first of all thank the Minister and his team of officials. I must say that I think it was 2 Fridays ago we walked the constituency, and I must say thank you for taking time of the busy schedule again to join us. I'm not going to rehash that because we are desirous of getting some works done, and there's a commitment to get those done. I would also want to compliment your drainage unit, Minister, because they've done a lot of work across Barbados, and particularly St. Michael West Central. We had a problem, for example, at Belfield, where the flooding caused certain damage to homes, and the unit responded well as they continue to do up until this point. Minister, the issue of Transport Board is one that I think deserves some national attention. The last government, the Democratic Labour Party government, we've accumulated approximately, by my last count, I think it was in excess of $500 million in deficits over the last 10 years. More than enough, I would concur, more than enough, that the Transport Board could have replaced its fleet and perhaps doubled the fleet. You could have taken up to almost 600-700 buses if you were going to assume on the basis of a carrying cost of about $500,000 a bus. And that needs to go into the record. The other issue is that the Barbados Labour Party had left a fleet replacement policy, and if we are lost, I'm speaking to Program 590, Sub-Program 527, that the Barbados Labour Party had left a fleet replacement policy that was never followed by the last administration, where we set out the policy. And the reason for that is because we had inherited a government before where we had to buy buses at 100 at a time, and we said that was wrong and that we would have done that. And I happened to be the chairman at the time, and I concretized that policy. And to the honourable member for St. Michael Northwest in this chamber, the issue of buses for disability, and the policy included purchase of buses for the disabled community, just to think how forward-thinking we were as a Barbados Civil Party government. And on top of that, a plan to ensure that we procure buses. So no buses were purchased within the last 10 years, and we are faced with a situation now where the transport board's peak, what you call the PVR, the peak bus availability.
I remember you have 1 minute.
Yes, would have so elapsed to a point where now the government effectively would have to go out there and buy 310 buses, but they can't afford it. So my question to you would be, Minister, and to your board, how are we going to integrate the public service vehicles into an integrated transport bus service, understanding and accepting that the transport board runs a scheduled bus service? I'll come back with a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, honourable member. And it's clear that we have seen what has essentially been a privatization of the transport system of this country. When you have public service vehicles totaling in the 700, 600, 700 region, and transport board having at best 70, 80 buses on the road, you can clearly see that the vast majority of the traveling public are using the public service vehicles. That's just a fact that we've seen. It was not always like that, but the previous administration made a decision to issue so many permits that we have now seen an essential partial privatization of transport. Indeed, the people using the Constitution River Terminal, we've measured that is about 10,000 people per day that use the Constitution River Terminal to go in or out to get transport. That's just one aspect, Constitution River Terminal. That has nothing to do with Princess Alice and the PSVs there, or in Speightstown and the PSVs there. So clearly, when we look at transportation, and by the way, we're going to be having a national consultation on transportation next month so that we can hear the nation come and give their views on how we must go forward as a country with respect to transportation. And that is something that we look forward to, because it's something that has been needed for a long time. And I think that once we can work together and and there's no question, the PSVs provide a valid service to the nation. For them carrying that number of people, they provide a valid service, and we see them as our partners. But what we need from them is better order on the roads and safety, which is of paramount importance. But I'm going to hand over to the chairman to also give his views as it relates to the transport board. We recognize that you are a former chairman and you understand, because you were there for a long time as chairman, and you understand the difficulties that the transport board experiences. Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Minister. In answer to the question to the honourable member, we started with a very, very difficult situation where we were about over $100 million in debt carrying on our books. Fortunately, the government has taken up most of that, if not all of it, under the BERT program. Now, when the last administration allowed a number of the lucrative routes, particularly the bypass routes and some of the long-haul routes going to Silver Sands and Bayfield and so forth, to be taken up by the PSVs, that had an immediate impact on the revenue projections for Transport Board. And we've been asked to carry the load, because although there are about 498 ZRs and about 225 minibuses on the roads, and about 70, 80 on average Transport Board buses, in the after peak hours, the only real game in town is the Barbados Transport Board. Right now, you would hardly find a minibus or ZR going to all of the routes in the the river terminal, so that load disproportionately falls on Transport Board, particularly in the off-peak hours. And at midnight tonight, all of the services going all over Barbados have to be serviced by Transport Board disproportionately to the rest of that number. That takes a significant toll on the fleet. It is overworked, and we believe that in the conversation about the rationalization of the optimization of routes in Barbados, a conversation has to be had in Barbados in relation to CN Transport as a public utility service, where the suppliers of that service cannot opt out. The same way Light and Power cannot say, for example, Madam Chair, that the load capacity in St. Joseph or St. Andrew is very low at 2 o'clock in the morning, so we will shut off all electricity service to those parishes. At that time, it is the same way we feel that the transport sector has to look to making a regulatory framework that prevents the public sector vehicles from coming off the route in off-peak periods, say after 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock, and then after 7 o'clock in the evening. So these are parts of the conversations that have to be had. Again, we do believe that there has to be some guarantee that routes developed by the Transport Board, there's a proprietary interest in some of the routes. We started a new cross-country route from Christchurch ending up in Kingarden, because there are the 2 high courts for the criminal courts are in Kingarden. And on the first morning, we tried that route about a month ago. There was 130 passengers in return going from Christchurch, Oistins into Kingarden on return. And when we start and develop these routes, particularly in the cross-country areas, we would like our organization, the Transport Authority, not to then saturate the routes with the PSVs, because the subsidy that we get from government is as a result of the government's commitment to ensuring that there's equity and that people who are in areas in Barbados where there is not a dense network or the ability to buy cars and so forth can get around, and the taxpayers bear that subsidy. The Transport Board has to provide that service, but at the same time, the opportunities for it to maximize its revenue on routes that it develops has to be protected going forward. So that is part of the conversation, Madam Chair, that we want to participate in.
Already. Go ahead.
Subsidiary questions. Now, the issue of the bus technology, and again, this is something that a Barbados Labour Party government left at the Transport Board when we demitted office in 2008. Next Bus, Smart Bus, you name it. And I would encourage, if the records are still there, for us to have a look at it, because I think the smart card technology in particular is where we're going there. The Barbados Labour Party was that advanced 10 years ago. We're 10 years late because we didn't occupy government 10 years ago. But another interesting perspective I think that the country should be aware of is that we are faced with a situation where, with declining bus availability under the last Democratic Labour Party administration, where the expenditure revenues were coming in about $51 million, but the expenditure with declining bus availability, with defective buses on the rise, rose to approximately $123 million. Just to put it in perspective, when the Barbados Labour Party left office in 2008, our expenditure was in the order of $78 million, and bus availability was up in almost 220 on average. So the issue I think that we're going to have to get our heads around fundamentally is how do we continue to we have to provide a scheduled service, and that's why I asked the question in respect of integrating, because I accept that a government, even though the peak vehicle requirement is about approximately 310 buses, I know you mentioned 178, but based on the route network, as I recall it, we require at least 310 buses on the road, because if we have 70 routes and we only have 70 buses, it poses a problem. So I think we're going to have to integrate, because the government cannot, and obviously taxpayers cannot afford it, the carrying costs at this time. So I support your approach. I welcome your approach. I think we're going in the right direction. But the issue for us is wherever possible to see if we can get buses on the road, or move to that integrated approach as quickly as possible, because the country clearly expects us to increase and improve the bus, general passenger service in the country. I also I would suggest to the Minister and his team to have a look at the Transport Board under the last administration had a document known as a corporate statement of corporate intent. It's dated January 2016. And I would suggest that that report be read by your team, sir, because when we come to a point where we have to have another discussion, it would help us to understand what went on in public transport, certainly the last 10 years. And with that point, Madam Chair, I will say to the team that you have a job ahead of you. You're doing a good job with the hand that we've been dealt with, but at the same time, I think the issue of an integrated approach must be considered as a matter of urgency, and I presume you are entertaining this matter as a matter of urgency.
Minister?
Not Minister. No.
I'm sorry, yes, member. As I said, maybe I'm looking into the future. What we're looking at, as I said, is the transport augmentation program, and that is a start. We're going to have to come back to Parliament at some point to change the law to actually allow public service vehicles to go into the terminal, and that's been a bugbear that we're working through. But certainly we're looking to get more PSVs using the terminal, helping us to augment the service, because we have to do that. The country just cannot have the 200 or 250 buses that we used to have. We recognize that was something of a previous Barroso Party administration, and we applaud that. But in the current situation, we just cannot take on that type of debt at this time. And it is all about enfranchising other entrepreneurs and giving them an opportunity to get involved in the industry as well. And we look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Honourable Member for the City.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report to the Speaker progress in this head, and I ask for leave to sit again. I will ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Now we wait.
The chairman has reported progress and humbly requested leave to sit again. Our member for City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker,
I believe that the honourable member for the city is speaking. Please let him speak. Please, please. This is a chattel. This is a chattel. This is a chattel. This is a humble chamber. Please respect it. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow in the forenoon.
Second, sir. The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Prior to this suspension, please let me issue a caveat, a warning to all honorable members. It is suspended until 10 a.m., not 11 a.m., so that we ought to be starting at 10 a.m. in the forenoon tomorrow. A word to the wise is enough.